absorb it and you think, that's quite literally true. It's not, just like that, one of the reasons games with these, like Solid Snake here, games that have avatars, that works because of a principle that has been known about, it's a trick on the human brain, because human beings are made in such a way that they feel that they feel their body extends only so far of where they have micro control, which is about this. A blind person feels that it extends a little further, and in the entire human history, only micro control would have been about this much you could have. But now, let's say you're watering a plant on a camcorder in Holland. You're here in China, and you're micro-moving. There is this effect where you feel your body right out there, because it tricked you. You've never seen it gone that far. Well, if you want to, that's the effect of when I say you have a surrogate body, it's very hard for the gamer not to feel that a piece of him did not go in the game. You feel like a piece of you in it. If you have children and you watch them playing Mario, when they jump out of the chair. Right? So this is an embodied cognition. Because of a trick, so the difference between this and a simulation a scientist looks at from the outside. Games you look at from both. You could sit back and analyze them in the godlike view to strategize, but then you can see them from a particular perspective of a surrogate body. Now, Eleanor Oakes pointed out a long time ago that in their simulations and graphs, while scientists are not in them, they talk as if they were. They'll talk as if they were the electron. So when the electron, so this idea of being able to go back and forth between a God's eye view, the big perspective, and then a local view, so that you feel what it's like, is actually a trick of scientists do in their heads, but games allow you. So this would be quite a good trick if you were going to use a game to do science, right? There are games that do electrons, and for the first time in history, you can have an experience of being an electron, right? Something we could never have done before. But scientists imagine, just like Einstein, part of how he did relativity is he imagined his body on a moving object, going at a certain speed. He imagined that. So, well, then what would have to happen in that? Now, not everybody thinks that way, but it's a embodied cognition. Yeah.
When you talk about embodied cognition, it brings to mind terms like cyborg.
Mm-hmm.
And, people have been talking about virtuality and reality. So I'm just wondering, in your opinion, is there a difference between virtuality and reality? Or, what are the differences?
Sure,
And what is the implication?
There is a difference, as I was saying to Rodney when he was saying, well, games, if you kill in games, buying games, you can't kill in games. Not yet. I mean, you can't push a button and kill Rodney. You can. You cannot kill in games, but you can buy something. So, yeah, they are different, just like a book is different from so-called reality. However, they bleed into each other, right? When you're buying something when Second Life was viable, its currency was legally tradable for money. So when you made a financial transaction, that was a real one. In fact, it has been argued that the number of virtual financial transactions that actually are tradable for real money is now so big in the world that it is a large part of the economy, and no economist tracks that. It counts as nothing because of their mentality that it couldn't be meaningful. So they bleed into each other.
My next question is, what's the implication, the mode of production and productivity in terms of productivity for human good?
Well, I can tell you that. So let me first tell you the implication for human evil. Because this is happening and you can make money, so if you want to. So the game is a very powerful way to engage people, right? I've said it's engaging your body, your emotions, your mind, and people are really absorbed in it. So there is a whole bunch of places now that gamify workplaces, right? And again, so often, they'll say it's for good. Let's gamify a call center because it's so boring. Or gamify stuff that's very challenging. But in fact, what the owner of the business wants is to surveil you and to increase your productivity. Because as you gamify and get points and he can see what you're doing moment by moment, and your productivity will go up and down. So to me, that's Big Brother. That's using control. The other side that is a potential for good is the internet, social media, this type of stuff has had some effects. For example, it has undermined our notion of expertise. You could be an 11-year-old, and if you want to put in the time, you could be as big an expert as anybody, and there's plenty of ways for you to humiliate the experts. That happens all the time. It has allowed people to organize outside of institutions, right? You don't need to have what you do licensed by an institution. And it has given, not that it's always used, it has given tools for production and design to more people than ever, right? Now, this issue has come up a lot because people have said several times that, not many people are actually, we live in the age of the so-called maker movement, the fad movement. You can print houses now 3 different ways. You can print a kidney. So the good side is it gives many, many poor people of any age the ability to be a producer and designer, not just a consumer, a participant, not a spectator. However, empirically it's the case that what I've called affinity spaces and other forms of social organization that is outside of these institutions, Flickr would be an example, they operate by the Pareto principle, and that is 10% of the people do 90% of the stuff and 90% do 10. Right? That's by the way, that's true of academics. In any field, 10% of the people produce 90% of all the publications. And actually, it's worse than that. The top 1% produce most of them. It's called the long tail. Now, in collective intelligence, there are organizations today that sell collective intelligence. That is, they'll go to a corporation and they'll say, if you got a really hard problem, because what we'll do is we'll get a whole bunch of everyday people to together build solutions. That's what that means is you can put up one, but then I can see it and I can build on it, we can add to it. And we'll see if the everyday, it's like the folded thing. People just go, well, so they make their money doing this. And I asked the guy who owns one of these companies, I said, do you get the Pareto principle? He says, always. A small number of people make most of the contribution. Then I said, well, how often is it the case that one of the contributions made by the 90% who do 10, right, the people who made one or very few, it was crucial to the solution? And he said, every time. Every time. Collective intelligence has to recruit all diversity, and what you find is very often, see how in school you get an F, you only did one thing. Oh, also the Nobel Prize too here. The thing is, you might know that one thing that everybody felt was irrelevant, not knowable, or becomes the key to things. So you don't want to say that people who are making, a small number of contributions should go away. Pareto principles could. If from schooling, because I've argued schooling should become sets of affinity spaces by which people find interests and passions and fuel it for 10,000 hours of practice, I would want a requirement that before you get out of school, you've at least found some affinity spaces in which you're in the 10%. But you should be in a lot that you're not, because you may have great things to contribute. It's wholly different. See, school's based on the bell curve. Bell curves don't exist hardly any place but at school. And by the way, at tests, you have to create them. You won't get one unless you design the testing. But in human interactions, operate much more by the Pareto.
Thank you very much for your talk. And I'm glad that you brought up affinity spaces, and kind of want to bring this back to the earlier talk about MOOCs, because I see a lot of similarity between what you're saying with gaming to the potential MOOCs, I guess, connected as MOOCs of gaming, Coursera, edTechs. Do you see them as potentially being an affinity space?
Well, see, I think MOOCs are just really stupid. Because all you did is you said, you critiqued the tradition of college, and then you said, to make it better, I'll do the same thing to 50,000 people. I mean, and it still accepts the idea that it's all about facts and information. And you get to, at least the ones I've seen, you get to watch a famous guy lecture. To me, this is really old-fashioned. Remember, I'm old. If you cannot directly ask a question to the teacher, directly ask them a question, then you are not in a class of any sort. However, that's just that. Now, of course, they could have been much more modern, right? What would it be like to be modern? Let's say you teach the Italian Renaissance. why teach 3 credits, 4 credits? Why don't you set up an affinity space in the Italian Renaissance? Easy, get Assassin's Creed, mod it, because that'll allow you to walk into any building in the Renaissance, get all its history, interact with anybody in it. And you teach your course, your students go in it, they actually do stuff in that world, they do it collaboratively. And guess what? When the course is over, they don't have to leave, they can stay. They can stay for 10 years. They can start teaching it. See, what the college is saying, wow, the alumni are still here contributing, right? And why don't we charge tuition like gas? The more you take, the more you get. Why does everybody have to take 3 credits? See, so we could say to people, look, this affinity space on the Renaissance, its primary purpose for many of you is so you can taste the Renaissance and see if it interests you. If it doesn't, there's other places to go. But it's important in life you find some passions, something where you'll spend 10,000 hours and get good and get committed and be a producer. And this will allow you to do that too. And if you do, you get to rise and lead and mentor and build and mod. Why couldn't the whole course curriculum be that way? See, why couldn't a MOOC have been that way? Why in the hell is it a lecture with a textbook? And a test that's multiple choice? With today's building tools, why can't the test be build a 13th century cathedral and be sure it doesn't fall down?
What about the connectivist approach to it, where students can then start their own, you call it portals, go to Facebook and start
Absolutely.
learning?
So, if you did it that way, people would say, we want to hive off here and mod our own fantasy Renaissance or our own other period, sure, and you did link to those and maybe portals. And see, what's happening is your students are now going to be writing the curriculum, right? Then you are the game master, you're in there, pretty soon you're at home with your salary, and no good work by you needs to be done anymore. You just show up in there, maybe sell ice cream in the Renaissance. It's fine. And you'll soon find there'll be people, some of them with no PhDs in there, that know more about the Renaissance than you. Right? So that would have been different.
Just coming from education, I just feel like the exchange value and the use value, it looks like to me that you're talking about the use value of education. But most students or teachers, at least in Hong Kong, they're interested in the exchange value.
That's right. And
the credential, the qualification.
yeah, and you see it's suicidal unless you're one of the Koch brothers. Because you don't even know who the Koch brothers are, do you? And they're ruining your world, they're killing you. They're the people who control almost all of the oil and one of the biggest employers in the world, and they're multi-billionaires, and they make the devil ashamed. You see, the thing is, look, we have a world with immensely growing inequality. Biggest inequality in history in the United States. We know that countries with high inequality have very poor health, from the rich to the poor. We know their economies are very unproductive. They're very poor, they don't work well. And all sorts of other problems you have. Then you turn around and say the purpose of education is, jobs, certificates of jobs. At a time in which experts are killing us, people like Alan Greenspan tell you to buy a balloon mortgage, the whole world collapses. I'm sorry, everything I know about economics said it was okay. I don't know what happened. What you are doing is entrenching an old model at one level, right? You're kidding the kids because you're telling them, oh, get this programming class and you'll be able to have a living wage. No, you won't, because only 1/5 of people. By the way, it's going to get much worse because the fabrication stuff and the generalized robots are going to replace the low-cost advantage of Asian countries. They will lose that advantage altogether. There will be no need for surplus labor. There may be no need for labor, period. Right? So in that context, telling a kid, pick up some of these skills for a job, it's like saying, here's your Walmart application. Well, first of all, how motivating to a teacher is that? And it's lying to the child. Right? And this, when the child knows that he can go home and on the internet become an absolute expert on anything he wants to do, right? And get together with other kids and bring down the Defense Department if he wants, right? So it's just a set of lies. Now, it is fully functional, right? In a world in which, you know, notice the world is going to the Pareto principle, right? 1% are gonna own, you know, virtually everything. The rest of us are gonna be serfs. Well, you know, a school system that prepares you to accept your serfdom by giving you no real way to see through to the deep features of the reality you're in is the Koch brothers' idea of the school. I said in an interview the other day, I find the Koch brothers completely rational. Right? They're just completely greedy. I mean, they're just greedy assholes. That's completely understandable. What I don't understand is the rest of us. Why do we let them kill us? We're letting them toxically kill. You know, Americans have more toxic chemicals in their blood than anybody in the world. Right? We're letting them kill us. I can't understand that. Greed I can get. Letting greedy people kill you is a harder thing to get. That's why I wanted to write about stupidity. Yes.
I've been wondering about the methodological implication of this reconceptualization of discourse through affordances and experiences. And it reminds me of Ron Scollins' argument in media discourse analysis that language has become too central in discourse analysis. So it seems like your redefinition of discourse through a set of experiences or affordances would naturally call for a methodological approach that looks at actions and practices. So discourse analysis will start from action instead of text. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying, you know, Ron was right about that. He's right about a lot of things. I mean, he was, as always, he was onto a lot of the stuff much earlier than other people. I don't think because, and again, I just take the United States because I don't want to insult British linguists or anybody else, but in the United States, the history of modern linguistics was so focused on syntax, right, because of Chomsky, that a thing like discourse became a really inane field, right? You know, it's basically totally descriptive, and you don't even describe stuff that might matter, right? You just do there, be, construction, and stuff. And so I'm not sure, and like so much it happened in America because linguistics became just syntax and phonology. All the parts of language that were more interesting got done by other people, right? Not linguists, which is kind of tragic. So the thing is, we didn't think very deeply about, even for language, what is discourse really doing, right? Why is sequence matter, right? And now that we want to apply it to multimodal images and to digital stuff, we might actually be able to discover a better way to do discourse analysis of language, because we might discover that the view, that even though we criticize the conduit view of language, that it's just a container of information, most of the analyses you see in discourse still accept it's just a piece of communication or information being transmitted. But if we take seriously that all speaking is recipient designed, you're designing for a recipient, we should also take seriously the recipient is designing a response based on what you did. So that it's probe and reprobe. And then we can sort of say, well, that isn't a new thing for humans. That's what they do with the world. And it's now what game designers say. See, game, you may or may not, I don't know, do people in China read Plato? Is he's still big? I don't know, I asked the bartender last night if she'd ever heard of Helen of Troy, but she said she never had, so I thought maybe. Plato had this complaint about writing, which was very interesting because he was one of the earlier writers in Western civilization. He said the trouble with writing is it can't talk back, right? It's just like painting. You ask it, what do you mean? It says nothing, right? Now, he would have loved video games then, because the video game, when you say something to it, says something back. And Plato was onto something deep. Oral language for us is about you saying something back. And for a scientist, it's really a conversation with the world, right? And the game designer said, well, now I can build and design experience for you where the conversation can be facilitatory, can be good, it can be poetry. I can add, just like books did, but it could be vicarious experience, but I can add experience that still has the response element in it, right? And that's what I'm arguing is core to the human mind, and I think Plato was right. We can make books talk back now. Now, of course, you know, good readers talked back for the book, right, in their head. But, so, yeah, I think that response cycle is, you know, I think it goes back to this view that humans think best when they are having an experience wherein they're supposed to take an action. That's why we can make school so bad for most people, because they have no action to take. If you have no action to take, you don't care. And if you don't care, you don't learn. Right? And if you care about the grade or going to Harvard, well, then you care and you learn. But see, if in school, my argument is if you first of all made it embodied cognition, that is, you gave all of the experiences and images that give meaning to the texts, and you only tested people on issues about which they cared, you couldn't get a bell curve. Everybody would pass. You couldn't fail anybody. And that would be a really screwed up world. Yes?
What are some of the movements that you see, or little inklings of something positive in education? Do you see anything? You know, you said uses of games.
Well, so this came up earlier. I mean, when I was listening to Neil's talk, it really struck me as weird. It was a great talk, but I mean, for most of my career as a critical theorist, I've talked about things to the table of which I've never invited. See, I just talked about the Koch brothers, and I've never been there, and they're not having me. But for the fluke of having written very early about video games, virtually everything he talked about, I have been at the table. I took a lot of MacArthur money, a lot of Gates money. The person who gives out the money for digital stuff at Gates is a former student of mine. The person who runs the games stuff in the White House is a student of mine. I was on the board for the Quest to Learn schools, and I was the one that got MacArthur to invest in badges. So I figured, is he criticizing me or what? And one of the things that that I've seen is that the force today of the Gates Foundation, because Warren Buffett gave his money, the second richest man in the world gave all his money to Gates, and that made that the biggest so-called charity in the world. It is utterly warped the American philanthropic scene. And the Gates Foundation has a huge axe to grind. It owns the Khan Academy. It's putting a management system under it. It is very deep into the punitive accountability movement for teachers. A teacher pay by test scores. And what you see is it's not a charity. It's a policy. And it is so what's happening, and by the way, the interesting thing is, even though they're pushing the Khan Academy, which is, you know, stupid beyond stupid, and the new Common Core standards and this stuff, the reason they're pushing this is their first foray into education was to start 200 small charter schools, every one of which failed. They acknowledged it was an entire failure. See, now mostly when you fail, you say, maybe I shouldn't be making these decisions. But no, you go right back to another educational policy. So there's a lot bad happening, but here's the potential good. But this could be this could be co-opted by Gates too. For financial reasons, having nothing to do with good-heartedness. American school districts and states want their text digital now because they don't want to pay for the publishing. And when they announced that, that really scared publishers like Pearson and others, right, who have to do this. And it also said to people like Murdoch, well, if it's digital, that's media. So we're publishers too now, right? So you added to the competition. But some states caught on, well, you know, if it's digital, it could be crowdsourced. It could be open source. It could be, modded, right? We don't need Pearson at all. See, maybe there's no market. In fact, Utah is going to crowdsource through its best teachers their math books, right? So all of this sounds really, see, because in America, when you had a physical book, if you couldn't sell it to Texas or California, the two biggest states, you couldn't sell it, right? So they had school board people who determined what could be in your book, and every other state had to use what they wanted, because that's not true with the digital tech. I could send it to 5 people. So this sounds good, right? On the other hand, the Gates Foundation, a year ago, I was at the launch of this, a year ago, gave Pearson, the world's largest publisher, was given by the world's largest philanthropy, money, charity money, to build digital text to go onto iPads and give away iPads to teachers. Now, what does it mean when the world's largest charity gives money to the world's largest publisher to make digital text, when that was the one opportunity we had to customize and to open source? I don't know, certainly they know something. But I do think once you say that the text is going to be digital, that could be a game changer in schools. Maybe for bad, maybe for good, but it's not going to be, we're not going to be saying, television never got into schools, and digital texts are going to school. Why? Not because we won't pay for the schools anymore, they're cheaper. As we have quit paying for them, we've opened the conduit, and it could be a game changer, but it could be co-opted. Right now, because this happens so quickly, and therefore there isn't a lot of curriculum already written for the iPad and stuff. If you had a curriculum right now, you could sell it quite easily tomorrow. There's a little open window. If you really wanted to intervene, you could do that. There's a site where teachers put up their own curriculum, and other teachers can buy it for very cheap prices, $3 or $4. And one kindergarten teacher's already made $1 million. See? So she can compete with Pearson right now. Maybe not tomorrow, right? So one of the real openings, which we should get behind, is say, if this is going to be digital text, it's going to be multimedia. It's going to be multimedia, we're going to get to problem solving and experiences and collaborative intelligence, and we're not going to take the same text for everyone. But we could do that. But you better go tell Bill to get off his iPads. Yes?
I'm not really familiar with the American context, but if they're digitizing text more, that means the affordances for discourse change.
They do,
right?
indeed.
Quite a lot. Is there staff development? Are teachers being
Well,
taught
no,
how
so-
to understand the affordances?
We don't do that with our teachers because we don't want them to be professionals. In America, there's a long-running distrust of both the federal government and of schools as socializers into citizenship. And when Americans are very divided, as they are now, they don't like their schools because they don't want their kids socialized as a citizen in the public, right? Either because they're yuppies or they're fundamentalists. So teachers would be dangerous if they were making their own curriculum, right? Certainly this digital stuff, they could mod the curriculum easily. And that would be a huge intervention. And the Cooney Center and one of the centers I'm part of are trying to make teacher affinity spaces where they can do that. But that's going to be crucial because schools of ed are not going to do it.
Are you in a sense arguing for deschooling?
Pardon me?
Are you arguing in a sense for deschooling?
No. I by the way, should say to Neil, another big thing now is unschooling in America. That is taking a kid out of school and doing nothing. Nothing. They just, the idea is kids are learners, just let them walk around. That's true. The thing I'm making, that's called unschooling.
It is part of the
Sometimes you have to get a building to store them in. Do you know, by the way, back to this question about change, that a textbook, there's tons of research that show it's the least good educational tool ever designed. There's a guy named Art Gracer who does wonderful research on artificial tutors and stuff, and in several of his experiments, he has a tutor that teaches algebra. And then he pits it against a human teaching algebra who doesn't know much algebra, and a human who teaches algebra who knows a lot of algebra. And then, just to be, fair, he pits it against a textbook. And then, I don't know why he does, he has a condition where he pits nothing. The kids just do nothing. Well, he found that a human who knows algebra, knows how to teach, will beat the tutor. But if the human doesn't know how to teach or doesn't know much algebra, the tutor will beat the human. Both will beat the textbook. Here's what's really interesting. The nothing condition beat the textbook. Kids learn more algebra by doing nothing. And that's our longest running resource. We can't really get worse, can we? I mean, imagine a critical theory that, I mean, no matter what happens to digitalized, it can't get worse than that, can it? Isn't that promise? Yes.
Isn't it something to do with the culture of how textbooks are written? Couldn't they be done better?
Oh, they could.
Yeah.
But it's the culture of how they're written and sold. Yeah.
How they're written and sold, they're just terrible.
They are
And-
terrible.
And if you try to sell an idea to a publisher of a really different concept of a textbook, they just won't.
No, they won't. I mean, as somebody once said to me, no textbooks failed to sell because it covered something somebody didn't want, but it did fail because it didn't cover stuff. So it has to have everything in it. Oh, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's bad. But again, the interesting thing is, why did we keep it so long?
But its worst thing is that it's a very much a culturally American phenomenon.
Is
And
it?
now with Pearson, this
Oh, yeah.
American phenomenon is imposing itself on the rest of the world. We've never had that textbook,
Yeah.
tradition
Oh, you
in
have it?
Australia.
Well, well, you know, but you
So we're going to have it now
No,
with
but you
Pearson.
see, you Australians did a lot of stupid things. I mean, when I first started going to Australia back in the 40s, you guys had the most equitable society in the modern world, and you had good schools. By the time I ended my trips to Australia, you had the same degree of inequality as America, and you had a whole rhetoric saying how broken your schools were, and you picked it up from America, and you created the problem. It wasn't there. So, I mean, it's amazing. You guys used to be proud of the equality you had, degree of equality. So, yeah, I mean, you know, America's an evil empire.
What's your take on critical pedagogy?
Pardon me?
What's your take on critical?
Do you mean the Henry Giroux sort of stuff?
In whatever versions or definitions?
Well,
whatever you want to choose.
the critical pedagogy of the American Agrarians is, even though the American Agrarians are friends of mine, I like them, I'm not at all criticizing them personally as a bankrupt theory. It's not a theory based on any particular pedagogy, it's a theory based on two things that are problematic. One, I know you're liberated when you talk like me, right? How do I know when you're politically liberated, you talk like me? And also that it should be democratic, and so you should just, you know, voice your view, and we should honor all voices. But you know, like if you're the one lesbian in a room full of football players, do you really want to voice your concerns? I mean, the thing is, democracy has to be prepared for that. So it's not, you know, you notice in all of that literature, there's never an example of an actual classroom or an actual pedagogy. It's true. Now, as far as I have said there is to me no such thing as critical discourse analysis, because any good discourse analysis is critical in the sense that politics, and by politics I mean the distribution of social goods, is inherent to language, right? You cannot communicate without communicating solidarity or deference, and so there isn't a separate thing called critical discourse analysis. There's just discourse analysis that left it out and ones that didn't. Now, critical shouldn't mean, however, that things are good only when they meet your politics. I think too much critical stuff is proselytizing. Even if you're right, it still should be the case that critical should mean the person is open to thinking, to evidence, and then you have to trust them. You know, years ago I was in South Africa. At a literacy conference, there was a group of teachers who were using critical literacy pedagogy. They were going to talk about it. And they said, wow, it didn't work. He said, because we gave them all these tools, and the first person they applied them to was us. I said, yeah, it did work. And they said, well, so they wanted to know, how could we do it when they apply it to the other guys? Yes, it's like I said, you know, we are the enemy. We're letting the Koch brothers kill us. It's not just them. I mean, there is a co-option for all of us, right? And institutions like any of you or academics, no, it co-opts you into ways that you'll have no impact. It'll tenure you for publishing in a high-quality journal that will be read by 5 people. But if you put something on the internet that 50,000 people read, they will fire you because you're pandering. So you're sure to have no impact.
That's right.
Hey, the difference is when you go to the Gates Foundation and you tell them stuff, you lose money. You know, literally, you lose money.
So I don't understand.
Well, if you say to Gates what I've been saying, you know, they don't give you grants. The last time I visited there, gave a talk like this, I lost $2.5 million. And I don't feel bad, I don't know what I would have done with it. The point is that, you know, if you wanna have impact, you've gotta speak the language they understand, but at the cost, it's just like in a university, are you willing to pay the price that you might not get tenure if you wanna have impact? I can't make you, tell you to do that, because it's gonna be your life. The irony is, those criteria, you know, if tenure is dying across the world, there's more fake journals than a real journal. The system is gamed infinitely, so you're playing a hugely broken game.
This is broken.
I really think this.
Thank God we're old, thank God we're old.
Yeah, there's a silver lining.
We're almost out. I think this discussion about criticality is really important, and we've had this discussion, it's sort of been in the background in this whole conference. And I mean, I actually remember 2 years ago when we also had we had our discourse conference 2 years ago, and we had, our theme was globalization and stuff like that, but there were a lot of critical discourse analysts there. And I think you're right, Jim, they came with this kind of idea of criticality. I remember we had one speaker, very well known critical discourse analyst, who was railing about, you know, university girls wearing makeup in Singapore, and how terrible it was, and how they weren't critical because they were wearing makeup, and you know, the way to get them to be critical is to stop them from wearing makeup. And I'm going, well, you know, they're pretty critical about which brands of makeup to buy, and how to get makeup, and how to combine the makeup, and do you know how to do any of that stuff? No.
I thought it was a shame men don't wear makeup.
Yeah.
We don't.
I'm all for it.
You know, I think that it's a real dilemma. If we think that our theories of language and politics are right, that we have to trust if we made a good argument, people will buy it. If we have to police them thereafter, then, you know, those of you who know the Ferrari critical pedagogy, the American version, Liz Ellsworth's famous article critiquing this, if you haven't read it, it's old, but it's essentially about why that approach isn't really libertarian. She's a theater person, education, wonderful, wonderful work. By the way, Ferrari was not an American Ferrarian, so he did not truck with that. I mean, these were all friends of his, and he certainly supported them, but largely because, as he once told me, he didn't know the American context. He wasn't going to talk about it. He also said, as I'm sure you know even from his writings, that he never thought of his work applying to the First World. It was not, he had no idea whether it did, should, or shouldn't. So when I say American Ferrarians, I'm not talking about. Are we done?
We're done whenever you say so, Jim.
No, you're the boss.
Do we have any more questions or comments or remarks?
Would you say God is a game designer, or game designer is
God is a game, nothing
God is a
else.
game designer, or game designer is God? Because we are just thrown into
Well,
this
let me,
game.
first of all, before we get into God, I do think that what game designers do and what professional teachers would do if we had them are very similar. They are designing creative learning, both of them are, which is experienced. And in fact, all of the principles in my books about how good learning in games are ones teachers know would be good learning in the classroom. So I think of teachers as designers of guided experience for learning, right? And that is their profession. And more game designers buy this. Now, God, I mean, what I was saying is that, you know, religions gamify the world, don't they? I mean, there's rewards, there's punishment, and they largely do so. And there's quests, and there's, you know, bad guys and good guys, and a lot of them have shooters, right? But you know, at the kind of origin of that is this, that humans cannot take the fact that stuff is random, right? We are made to only feel comfortable when stuff has meaning and pattern, and if it doesn't have it, we put it in. And perhaps in the hunting-gathering days, there was really no danger to that, right? But now, when you're a billionaire and you start to say God told you to do X, Y, or Z, there's really profound, to take over the earth with oil, it's really dangerous.
Yes.
So but I do think that human urge to make sense
Yes.
and of course states know they can tap it, right? Especially this idea that somehow you're related, right? Or everybody in a country is related is a tribal way to do that. So, yeah, there are Will Wright designs what people call God games. Essentially, you're God. You're in all of those games. You are building the world and making moral choices and doing it. And nobody I know has built a world though like the one at least Christians claim, where there's a heaven and a hell, and you're supposed to suffer so that you can be happy later. I haven't seen one of those.
But isn't that kind of contradictory to the idea of education or teaching and learning if everything is random? Then, you won't teach a
No,
person because you don't know
education
how it's
should
gonna
be
happen.
about the truth. I'm not a postmodernist. I don't mean capital T truth. The fact is, the universe has not got your interest at heart. Evolution is true. Dinosaurs were not on the world with humans. The Earth is older than 10,000 years old. These are all American beliefs. But what is true is that humans can make and change experience and can make meaning true. You can make the world better. What you can't do is make the world have evolution never occurred. You can't will your cat not to be a carnivore. It's not his choice, right? I live in Sedona, the New Age capital of the world, and a little New Age lady told me I should have a talk. I have 9 cats, and she said I should have a talk with each of my cats and tell them how bad it was to eat meat. And she didn't understand. A carnivore cannot survive. And I tried to tell her. She said, no, it's not true. And I take them for walks on leashes, and she says, well, you don't need the leash. Just talk to them and tell them not to go away. So I finally said, well, I have 9. Can I talk to them all at once, at least? And she said, no, we have to have an individual talk. First one told me to get lost. All right, thanks.
I'd just like to take a moment to thank Jim and thank all of you for coming. At the beginning of these 2 days, I said, this is a bit of a different format than most of the conferences I go to, and probably most of the conferences you go to. No parallel sessions, no big plenaries, no need to wait for the coffee break to have discussions. That the purpose of this was to get a small group of people, a small group of really smart people into the room to exchange ideas, and that's what happened, and I feel really enriched and really satisfied by it, not just from the guests that we invited and that we sort of bought dinner for and paid tickets for, but also for the guests that came for free. Our sort of crowdsourced intelligence was in the back of the room. And so thank you all for coming as well. And finally, I just want to take the opportunity to thank our students and Hemans and Chris as well for taking care of us so well in these last 2 days. So it's Saturday afternoon in Hong Kong and it's not raining. Yeah, well, we do our best, right? So, if any of you are wondering, what to do on a Saturday afternoon in Hong Kong, you can approach either me or Christoph or Alice, and we can give you some suggestions. Hong Kong is a great place. I know some of you are leaving tomorrow, so I really urge you to take tonight to go out and play and find that experience a little bit of this great city. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.